Welcome back, Dina. Welcome back to yet another podcast of the Eternal Self. I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you. Just before coming live, we had a brief conversation. Thank you. And about people losing their loved ones, about interdimensional existences, where we go. I mean, these are some questions that I've dabbled with pretty much all my life. And I've never really landed with any, I mean, nobody does, but with your insights into the past, into the present, into different stages and eras, I'd love to hear from you. How does it really work? Where do we come from and where do we go and what's going on?
Namaskar, and I'm happy to be here again. Um, I'm sort of filled with that subject because I've just finished writing Sita's Yoga. And in the book, it talks about the consciousness of the Treta Yuga. And we cannot understand the story of Ram and Sita unless we can peer into the mind of the Treta Yuga person, because it was a different consciousness. And there's so much once you can get into the mindset, and we can only do it through glimpses, although in every age, at every time, there are people who have that consciousness. So even during the darkest times, there are people who have the consciousness of the highest yuga, and in the higher yugas, there are people who are still more at a more elementary stage in their soul evolution. So we can, through our spiritual practices, gain some insight into what that time was like. And so, what were some of the distinctions in their consciousness? Well, it's known that they overcame the limitations of time. What does that mean? They could see into the past and the future more easily. So if you have a loved one who passes away, they could more easily peer into that person's past and understand why that person chose to leave at that time, because everything is by a soul choice, not our conscious mind. But when we come into this world, we create the blueprint for our life. And it's not a conscious choice. It's a choice at a much deeper level, because we know which karma we're going to fulfill in that particular life. And most of us can't see that. I mean, the even the person going through life is not conscious of that, but at a deeper level, and you come can become awake to that at a deeper level. Everything that happens to us is through our soul's choice. That's very important to remember because it gives us agency. We are the controllers of our life. And so a tragic person could see into the past and could see into the future. And that it didn't make loss any less painful, but it made it more understandable. And there was also the sense that you don't lose touch with people if they pass from this life, because just as they were able to overcome the limitations of time, they were able to overcome the limitations of space. Now, what does that mean? That means they were able to understand that when you leave the physical plane, you awake in a different plane. In other words, there's no ending, there's just a shifting of one's consciousness. And there's a phrase in the book, where the mind is, that's where you are. So you can project yourself, and this is actually a practice that Buddhists do and yogis do as well. If a loved one passes, you can project your consciousness to where that soul is, and you can connect with that soul.
Mm.
In other words, you're feeling the presence of that soul, and you can, it's a very concrete feeling of connecting with. So I had a friend who passed away about a month ago, and I was a very, very, very dear friend, someone who I didn't see very much. He lived in Switzerland, but he was very dear to me. And for several weeks, I was looking for him, and I couldn't find him, because the soul passes, when you pass, you're also in a state of sort of reviewing your life, and so uh, that's where your energy is. But then at a certain point, you sort of come awake to the new place where you are, and it takes a few weeks in Earth time. But after a few weeks, I immediately felt his presence and felt the connection with him. which has been ongoing now for about 10 days. So, and that's happened to me with other people as well. So we have to begin to think of ourselves as multidimensional creatures who can connect with people in different dimensions. And, what we call celestial realms, heaven realms, hell realms, those are just different dimensions.
Right. And Dina, is it true that that connection with the soul who's passed over is easier in the first 13 days or say a couple of weeks? And because they're still sort of around, but then they move on further, and as time passes by, then they just move on into another dimension or whatever, but that connection doesn't, uh, I mean, depending on the soul,
I,
but
I think it's different. I don't think there's any one rule about what happens. Like in the Tibetan tradition, they say after 40 days or so, you take rebirth. There's no one rule. Everybody's karma is different. And my experience has been like in the immediate passing, it's hard to find that soul because the soul is going through its own process of realizing that it left the body, going through sort of like a life review. But then they sort of become more conscious of where they are. It's almost like a semi-sleep state. They wake up, and that's when you can connect with them. And for me, my experience has been it takes about 2 weeks. And then, yes, they do stay close to the earth for a period of time, and then sort of move on to the next soul learning, because what is it that they've accomplished? They begin to have recall of their history, and then begin to set the blueprint for the next birth. But you can stay connected with them until until uh, until they take rebirth. It's not. I mean, your need to be connected also weakens over time. So in the immediate aftermath, there's a need to stay connected, right? But then over time, when you see that they're progressing on their soul's journey and that they're doing what they need to do, you can just feel sort of like, yes, we're in touch. But I don't need to stay totally focused because they're continuing on their journey. I'm continuing on my journey. And they're like threads of connection that continue.
I think the way I've taken like sort of settled it in my brain is that I can't be too selfish and latch on to the soul, because if the soul is chosen to move on and move forward and everything, I don't want to stifle their freedom by constantly yearning for them.
Process that, yes. So instead of clinging or yearning, it's just almost like a love connection, a connection of, I just need to know that you're doing well.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me just continue to feel that bond so that I know that you're doing well. And that's all.
And if there is
And
a
allow them to move on to the next stage. Otherwise, you are holding them back if you cling. Um, but there are things that you can do, there are things that you can do to let them know that things here are going well. I mean, there's a communication that takes place at a soul level. So that communication doesn't cease. I mean, when they take birth again, that's harder. It's harder to maintain that connection because their memories subside.
oh,
They have to in order to be able to focus on the new life. As long as they're in that other dimension, there's sort of recollections of their earth life that maybe get fainter and fainter, but they're still there. And then when they take birth again, it goes to sleep, those memories.
hmm,
And the whole gestation period is sort of like a putting to bed those memories so they can really get a fresh start.
wow. Beautiful. Thank you, Dina. That really helps. And Dina, in beginning of our conversation, you also mentioned that while we are on Earth, we can also do interdimensional travel, like astral travel or something of that sort.
A little different from astral travel. So astral travel is when people leave their bodies and appear in another place in the three-dimensional world. Like I, in meditation, leave my body and show myself to somebody in India. That's astral travel. My astral body is moving through the three-dimensional space. The astral world is a mental world. There's no physical body. There's a mental world and there's a light body. One can, as it says, where the mind is, that's where you are. So you can project your consciousness. And in a way, that's when you do. I know after my father passed, it was almost 4 years now. It was the same process. I couldn't find him for a few weeks. And then I found where he was. And I was able to project myself to where he was. So I was actually able to walk with him and talk with him in the space where he was and understand why he was in that space. It was a really beautiful learning place for him to be. And so you can project your consciousness into other realms. And I mean, just like you can communicate by thought with people on the earth plane, you know, how many times has it happened? You're thinking of somebody and then they call you because they picked up on that energetic level. It's the same thing in the astral world. I mean, the astral world is here right now. The only reason we can't see it is because our eyes have a limited range of perception. So if you lose a loved one, that loved one might be within your vicinity right now, but you can't see that loved one because your eyes can't perceive. Our senses are very limited. We have a very narrow scale of what we can see, and we have a very narrow scale of what we can hear. But there is an internal hearing, so you can actually have a conversation with somebody. That's what channeling is really. You can actually hear through internal facilities and be in dialogue with someone in another realm. In other words, the dimensions are much thinner, the veils, much thinner than we think of. But the only way to know that is to develop our spiritual capacity,
Mm.
our spiritual capabilities, because the senses are designed to be limited. The senses are designed to only see a very narrow a breath. But we have spiritual faculties that are not limited.
So yes, meditation is one way, Dina. But how does one actually, like, yes, sit, introspect, reflect? You've talked about it every time. Could you talk us through the process in meditation, other than focusing on breath, or what is the real, is it keeping the spine straight, or what is your process?
Of the mind. There are things that can help you focus the mind. Everything comes back to the mind. And all the techniques help you focus the mind, whether it's your posture, whether it's mantra, watching your breath, just being mindful of what arises, not, watching the thoughts come and go. All of those things are just to help one control the mind or to not, I wouldn't say control the mind. I would say to change, to identify not with the mind, not, in other words, to identify with that which is witnessing the mind. Thoughts come, you are not those thoughts. That's the mind doing its thing, just like the eyes does its thing,
Yeah.
and just like the ears does its thing, the brain does its thing, which is, to create thoughts. But we are not the brain, we're not the eyes, we're not the ear. These are faculties that we have in order to function on the three-dimensional plane. But the whole purpose of meditation is to detach yourself from the senses and from the mind so that you can access that deeper part of yourself. And that deeper part of yourself, and it's a lifetime's worth of work. I mean, it's not something that comes in 5, 10 years. It's a whole lifetime of practice. And so even if you're sitting in meditation and you don't think anything's happening, the more you become aware of the part of yourself that is witnessing it all, and the more you can stay in that consciousness, even when you're active in the world, then the more quicker you're going to be able to access uh, the vastness of the universe. In other words, we are so reactive. We react because that's how we've been trained, right? That's how the mind's been. We react to world events. We react to family people who say things to us. We're constantly reacting to what's coming at us from the world. There's a chapter in the new book on Sita called the Yoga of Non-Reaction. Non-reaction. So there are many things about many aspects of yoga that are not specifically when you're sitting in meditation, but it's the yoga that you practice when you're active in the world, the yoga of non-reaction. The more, and we need to sort of assess ourselves, you know. Have we been reactive today? What have we reacted to? Why are we reacting to that? I mean, everything is a passing show. We react to things so strongly. Tomorrow it's going to be nothing. I mean, we can't even remember the things that we reacted to 10 years ago.
Yes, yes.
So it's a matter of stepping back from that reactive mind and living in a deeper part of yourself. And that's moment to moment work. Meditation is a part of it, but meditation is only half the battle. Meditation is meant to help you during the rest of the day. If you spend an hour in meditation, you're spending how many hours doing other things? That 1 hour is supposed to help you with the rest of the day.
Right. Yes. So, Dina, like what I intended originally to talk about was that there is change happening all around. We are in uncertain times, be it the climate, be it politically, be it with everything that's happening around us. There's so much change around us. How does one find some quiet spiritual groundedness in times when there's so much in transition, so much in, you know, there's so much.
I think it's in part working on. There's also a chapter on the book called The Yoga of Non-Judgment. It's like unless we can understand, I mean, it's very easy to judge, and I fall into this trap. People who are causing harm, people who are doing, really, harmful things, causing suffering, and yet if we don't know their past. And we can't understand why they're doing those things. We can only really understand the why if you can see their past, which was why the whole Traita Yuga consciousness was so different. Because when you can see the past, then you say, aha, okay. And then if you can see the future, you can say, wow, they're going to have to pay. They're, that person who's created a lot of harm is going to have a lot of learning ahead of that person. It's not an enviable future. And so then you can have compassion because you see what's ahead. So, also it's important to remember, I mean, we are being tested right now. We certainly in the US are being very tested right now because there's so much going on. Every day there's something new that causes a reaction. And I wrote at the end of the book, as I was writing the chapter on non-reaction, I was reacting. I was reacting to what was happening politically in the country. And I really had to take, because a lot of the writing comes through me. And I thought to myself, well, this teaching is for me right now. And that's the way it was with every chapter. This teaching is coming to me right now. And I had to really work on that non-reacting. And I would be fine for a while and then it would get triggered again. Uh, um, because when we're so much in the reality of the now, but it's all a passing show. It's all a passing show, and I remind myself, I was just telling the story of Narad and Vishnu. Do you know that story where Vishnu asks him, they're walking together, Vishnu asks him if he could go get him a drink of water. And he says, wonderful. And he goes and he wanders looking for a drink of water. He comes to a door. He knocks on the door. There's a beautiful woman who answers. And he says, I need a drink of water for my Lord. She says, well, come on in. And then she says, here's a drink of water. But while you're here, let me feed you. And she feeds him. Then you might as well stay the night. And he stays the night. And before long, he's married to this woman. And then he has children. Forgot all about the drink of water for Vishnu. And then he has children. And then he has grandchildren, and he's living a happy life, and then a great storm comes and destroys his house. The whole family dies off, and he's mourning all that. And then he wakes up, and then he goes back, and then Vishnu is there and said, "Did you get me my drink of water?"
Wow.
That's the way life is.
Oh,
Even now, the great Narad got trapped by Maya, and Vishnu did that to teach him how powerful Maya is, that we get so lost in delusion that we forget our purpose. And then we just get into the dream and the drama of it all. It's a wonderful story. I'm not sure which of the texts it's from, but it's a story that I often remind myself of because it's everyone's story.
very true.
You know, we get lost in the pleasures of life, and then we get lost in the sorrows of life. And then Vishnu has to come and remind us why we've gone out, only to serve the Lord.
Wow.
So maybe that's a good place to sort of end for today, huh?
Yes, yes, I'm almost gobsmacked in any case. I'm, yeah, lost for words. Thank you, Dina. I'm getting goosebumps all over. Thank you so much
So
for
the trick is to and the Gita too talks about being the witness. So it's okay we feel sorrow at certain things, but be the witness of that, and know that what you're going through is transitory because you can't see the whole picture. You know, you lose somebody who you loved. Well, that somebody is not gone; they're just someplace else, and you can connect with that person and meet again. And so it's just not to get too attached to forms, which is very hard. I mean, if it happened to Nard, it would happen to all of us, right? He was a great, great, great soul, you know? And so it shows you how powerful delusion is. Yeah. So we will continue
yes.
next time.
Thank you so much, Dina. I'm really grateful for this conversation.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye now.